Today we will be speaking about healthy aging and some very specific ingredients that can help support certain benefits for this special population group. So let's get started. We will have a look at the statistics of how old people actually are at the moment. And you can see on the left-hand side that we reached 1 billion people that are over the age of 60. So that's 13.5 of the world's population. Now, if we're looking where we are heading to, in like 30 years from now, this number will double. So we'll be at about 2 billion people. So that means almost a fourth of the world population. Obviously, that's a large amount, and that needs to be taken into consideration, thinking about healthcare costs, etc. And because this is an important topic, even the United Nations adopted a resolution last year, and they are calling the next 10 years the decade of healthy aging. And surely the pandemic showed us that there are huge problems when it comes to policies, systems, services for older people. So we really want to make sure with this collaboration of associations, media, science, to really improve the life for older people, their families, and the communities they live in. So what are the factors that can actually influence healthy aging? And the WHO defined 2 categories. On the right-hand side, you see environmental factors. So that can be, where people are living. Assisted technologies, that could be, canes, crutches, wheelchairs, scooters. Transportation, if that's available. And of course, also social facilities. And then on the left-hand side, there are individual factors that can play a role when it comes to healthy aging. And of course, that's behaviors, like how physical are people, age-related changes, linked to joints, muscles. We have genetic aspects as well as age-related diseases. So all that needs to be taken into consideration. Now let's look at the situation in Mexico. What's happening here? And here we see that actually the number of people 60 years and above will triple in 30 years. So even more than what we see the average world population will be. And the aging population has been associated with developing a risk of non-communicable diseases, disabilities, and frailty. And non-communicable diseases such as diabetes and obesity are a big problem also here in Mexico. We see that for abdominal obesity, that's especially the risky type of obesity. It is the highest between the age of 40 to 79 and has the highest percentage of hospitalized people in Mexico. And since we're not past the pandemic yet, unfortunately, we also see the age group from 40 to 69 has the highest percentage of death due to COVID. So overall, we can say that the health outcome in older life is quite a heterogeneous process. So it really depends and can vary quite a lot. So, healthy aging, we also like to call it positive aging, because obviously we want to be the best, our best self, right? So when we think about health in long term, a key factor is prevention. And so we asked in surveys in Latin America, people that are 50 years and older, what they thought about preventative aspects. And here you can see on the left upper corner, almost 70% of them pretty much always choose foods and beverages that actually have preventive health benefits. And more than 80% of them say that nutrition is an important aspect when they are choosing which foods and beverages to buy. And then specifically for Mexico, the people that are 56 years and older, we have almost 80% of them that take actively steps to make their nutrition healthier. Healthy foods that they are eating. Now, staying focused on Mexico, we also wanted to know what they think of nutrition. And so we asked them a few questions, and here you can see some results on the left-hand side. 63% of them actually say that high fiber claims would convince them a lot in buying food products. And that's more than the average population. That's only 58% who would do that. And on the right-hand side, we have 64% of them that pretty much always consider nutrition claims when they buy new food products, compared to 61% of the overall population. So we can see that for the older population, nutrition is really of high interest, which is very nice to see. Now, what are the health challenges as we age? You know, there's a decline in physiological functions, and there are several challenges that are listed here. Obviously, dental health, you know, tooth loss or dry mouth. For bone health, we know osteoporosis, osteoarthritis can increase when aging. The immune response declines. And also there are metabolic changes as well as gut microbiome changes. You know, also linking to digestive health, people are more constipated when you get older, they are less active. And then last but not least, we also have the blood sugar management aspect that is of importance. Older people tend to be more tired, so they are lacking in energy, and of course there's a big risk of developing diabetes. So we can say that certainly nutrition and health are strongly related, and there are very special ingredients that I will introduce you today from BENEO that can help with that. But first, let's talk about blood glucose management, why that is important, and why low glycemic carbohydrates play a big role here. Looking into our customers, customer insights, and what the older generation thinks about high blood sugar levels, we'll focus on the left-hand side, the Americas, Latin America, Central America. Here you can see that among the 50-year-olds and older, actually 32% are extremely concerned about high blood sugar levels. And 1 out of 11 actually is affected by high blood sugar levels. And even more than 43% are choosing foods wisely to manage their blood sugar levels. And you know, that pattern we can also see in other parts of the world. So it's a similar pattern. And certainly people are aware of high blood sugar levels and want to keep that in mind when they choose foods and beverages. And now blood sugar level or blood sugar management is pretty much important to everyone, no matter how old we are. It starts from, you know, pregnancy all the way through infancy, adulthood, and to the older individuals. And the reason why is because our blood sugar levels should be more balanced throughout the day instead of having these spikes going on, because in the long run we see high blood sugar levels relate to non-communicable diseases like obesity, diabetes, but there's also a link now to infectious diseases, so affecting our immunity, which is of course nowadays of relevance. And here we can see that blood sugar management is not just on top of minds for our end consumers, but also in the research world. There's a lot of research popping up here and there, linking blood sugar management to certain health benefits or health risks if the blood sugar is elevated. Now, talking about blood sugar management, of course, we need to also talk about our blood sugar levels. And here we talk about glucose tolerance, because glucose tolerance declines with age. So it's the ability how our body handles the blood sugar level. And when that declines, there is a likelihood to develop so-called impaired glucose tolerance, which is a precursor for diabetes. And that then increases the risk for diabetes, but also for cardiovascular and metabolic diseases. So certainly something that, you know, individuals and the older population should keep in mind when they are choosing healthy foods, that it's also about the quality of the carbohydrates. So we know lower blood sugar levels are beneficial. It sounds pretty logic, and it actually is. It has also been confirmed by researchers. And here, several years ago, a bunch of researchers gotten together to discuss how a low glycemic diet may have an effect on health outcomes. And here you can see that a low glycemic diet can actually improve blood glucose levels in people with diabetes. They are able to reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes and coronary heart disease. And there's a high likelihood that low glycemic diets also benefit weight management, so reducing total body fat mass and supporting weight management. And now there are also several meta-analyses that looked into those findings, and they see that they support that low glycemic diets and the low GI, low glycemic index, and low glycemic load are important markers for that, for showing how good a carbohydrate is, and that should actually be part of dietary guidelines. So really looking for low glycemic index or low glycemic load food choices. And as I mentioned before, high blood sugar levels also relate to immunity, and here we can see why. And that actually also was released, or we knew about it even before Corona. Here's a review from 2016 from the Texas Tech University, and they did a study looking into the fact why some of the hospitalized patients had worse outcomes than others. And they came to the conclusion it was because of their blood sugar levels. So the ones that had high blood sugar levels had worse outcomes. And interestingly enough, it's not just people with diabetes that we're talking here, so the ones that have long-term issues with blood sugar levels. No, it's also when you have short-term high blood sugar spikes. So any one of us could be affected by that. If our blood sugar level is really high, it could, be linked to infectious diseases, or it could, make the progress of an infection even worse. And so researchers are basically saying now is the time, having Corona in mind, to really look into healthy food choices, low glycemic food choices. Now, how do we do that? There are two ingredients that I want to introduce you today. That is isomalt and chicory root fibers, or inulin and oligofructose. So let's get started with isomalt, our slow-release carbohydrate. It is naturally also found in honey, and it's a disaccharide like sucrose. So glucose and a fructose molecule, but there's one difference here compared to sucrose. It has a stronger link, and that stronger link, that stronger bond, makes all the difference when we look into the health benefits that we see. And isomaltulose also comes from the sugar beet, so it's plant-based and all natural. So let's look into the nutritional benefits that we see with isomaltulose. It is a fully digestible, slow-release carbohydrate. With that, we are able to see a lower rise in blood sugar levels, sustained energy, as well as higher fat burning rate. So overall, we can say isomaltulose is the smart sugar choice. And I'll talk about some of these benefits in just a second here. So what happens when we are actually consuming isomaltulose? As I mentioned, it is a fully digestible, slow-release carbohydrate, so it gets digested in the small intestine, but in a slower way. And that's why we see a slow glucose release, so a low glycemic effect. It still provides the full calories of 4 kcals, and nothing really happens in the large intestine. So similar to sucrose, there's very good tolerance, even in larger amounts. Now I want to go a bit deeper into the aspect of why palatinose is so slowly absorbed, or to kind of show it to you here on this nice orange bar, which is resembling our small intestine. So we have sucrose. You know, sucrose is a high glycemic carbohydrate. It is digested, absorbed in the first part of the small intestine and delivers us fast energy that we need for certain instances. Now, on the contrary, isomaltulose here really uses the whole length of the small intestine to be absorbed. And therefore, we see a slower release of glucose also into the bloodstream, and that in the end leads to a more sustained energy. So we know it works in theory. You know, we know that a low glycemic diet is more beneficial for our overall health. And we also know it in practice, even from a single intake of isomaltulose, which is also called palatinose as the brand name. So even from a single intake, we see that the blood sugar level with palatinose is lower compared to sucrose. So the peak is lower, and you see a nice tail towards the end for that sustained energy effect. Now, research also shows that over 24 hours, so over a full day, we see those benefits. Here in this study, we see that the blood glucose levels were lower throughout the 24 hours, and even the glucose variability was lower. That means those spikes, ups and downs, were less, so it was more balanced throughout the day. And we could even see a so-called second meal effect. And that means that, for example, when palatinose was given for breakfast, we could see that lower blood glucose effect for lunch, even though palatinose was not given. So a nice effect even after a few hours. And of course, we have the research for it. There are over 30 human trials that show this lower blood glucose response with palatinose. And then obviously also there's a lower release of insulin into the blood. There's one other benefit with isomaltulose, not just one, but one that I want to mention today that relates to the elderly population, and that is cognitive performance. Because we know that glucose tolerance plays a role in mental performance in older adults. As I mentioned before, glucose tolerance declines with age, and we see that poor glucose tolerance can relate to cognitive decline. So now the idea of the study that I will show you in a second was how can meals, low glycemic meals, affect the cognition and mood, certainly. So what was done is isomaltulose was given as a breakfast concept to their regular foods. So they had it in yogurt and in milk. And the participants were 45 to 80 years old. So they received isomaltulose and then as a control, glucose or sucrose. And what we were able to see is in the late morning, so a few hours after their breakfast, that the individuals that consumed isomaltulose had better memory and even improved mood, though they felt better with isomaltulose compared to the controls. So very nice results here. Not to forget that inulin is also found in natural foods, as you can see here at the bottom. Now, what are the benefits that we see with chicory root fibers? They can be used for sugar reduction, fat reduction, as well as calorie reduction, for example, depending on the application. We know it is a prebiotic fiber, so it helps improve digestive health and also reduces blood sugar levels. And in the end, it is a fiber. Inulin is a fiber, so if you add it to your foods, you're obviously also adding fibers. And most of us are not getting enough fiber, so it's a nice add-on. So let's stick with the blood sugar aspect. If you would consume chicory root fiber by itself, there wouldn't be any blood sugar increase. So it would be a very neutral, horizontal blood sugar level. But here in this graph, we are looking at a food that contains available carbohydrates. And so if you're replacing part of those available high glycemic carbohydrates with chicory root fiber, you are able to reduce the blood sugar level, similar with palatinose. And we see actually with a 20% replacement of chicory root fibers, we see a significant decrease in the blood sugar level, only with 20%. Let's stay a bit with the fibers here and come to immunity and how it can support our inner defense. As I mentioned, the chicory root fibers are prebiotics, so they are very special when it comes to that. And the prebiotic research has started long time ago, over 20 years ago. And BENEO actually was there from the get-go pretty much, invested a lot into the research, and we're still doing that. Now there is a so-called scientific prebiotic definition from the International Scientific Association of Pro and Prebiotics called ISEP. And they're reviewing the research and the science every few years. And the last definition that came out was in 2017. And here it is. This is the definition: a substrate that is selectively utilized by host microorganism conferring a health benefit. So that means that a prebiotic really needs to show a selective effect and in the end obviously also a health benefit. So something good needs to come out of it. And now I want to show you what the prebiotics currently are from a scientific point of view. There are three. And that is inulin and FOS, so oligofructose, as well as GOS, galacto-oligosaccharides. Now, all the other ones that you see here on the list are potential candidates, and they are usually lacking health benefits, so the research doesn't show the health benefits that you need in order to actually be a prebiotic. So it's very nice to see that the chicory root fibers, inulin and oligofructose, are confirmed scientific prebiotics. Okay, let's go back to the colon and actually to immunity. So as I mentioned, 2/3 of our immune cells are located in the colon. And we know that there is a link between the microbiota and the immune system. So if the microbiota is out of whack, so if there's a dysbiosis, we know that it can affect the immune system. And so we need to really provide and promote our good bacteria. And we do that with the right ingredients, with prebiotics like the chicory root fibers. And with this, I'd like to present my summary slide here. I know I talked a lot about the different benefits and ingredients. So here, this is a nice summary that really shows you the benefits we see with isomalt and our chicory root fibers, inulin and oligofructose, for certain aspects like blood sugar response or blood glucose management, how it can affect cognition or immunity, as well as bone health and digestive health.